Okay, let's take a look at this Sky Traders thing. Given that it's Fantasy Flight, I think I was probably mistaken about this being a Kickstarter project. I don't think they do those. Well, first of all, this was a disappointment. I buy games because it's a game like this because it had supposedly an interesting economic structure, and I gotta say I'm not thrilled with that. I'll get more in detail about that in a little bit. Component-wise, I've gone over this a little bit. They waste a bunch of pages on background material that I haven't even read, but it doesn't really look terribly interesting. You know, it's not like there's a world to support here that I know of. If there was, that would be great. If this is, part of a role-playing game or something, not part of a role-playing world where this information would help you link into that world, I'm good for that. It's not enough information to really give you a grasp, and the game is so abstracted it doesn't really make a damn bit of difference in the end to your play of the game. The actual rules themselves are pretty simple and not terribly badly done. This is a Fantasy Flight, and I don't feel like they did a bad job at all. Then again, they are very simple. How much damage could they do, right? Component-wise, the little ship's pretty. Honestly, visually, this game is very, very nicely done. However, except maybe these plastic things, I'm not thrilled with them, but I'm sure some people are. If you painted them up, they'd probably look pretty good. However, the similarity of the colors and their kind of muted taste, the cards, hard to distinguish between them, this can present real problems. In particular, if you have full color blindness, you're just pretty much screwed because there's no other indication on these barrels. Of course, you could mark them up with a letter if you had a color blindness player to play with. And with the red-green, you can mark one set of red and green in that circumstance. One problem with it is the errata requires that you're going to mark up these beautiful components or just remember all kind of stuff that's on them. And I'm really not thrilled with that idea. So, given that I don't think the errata actually adds a hell of a lot to the game from sort of I can see reasons you'd want to use it, but I don't think that it vitally changes the flavor, except making it a little less of a garbage scow game, or the playable the enjoyability of playing the game itself by adding these. It does have some significant effects. So, for example, there's something that reduces the length of the game by reducing the cost to achieve different victory pool spaces. However, that's kind of offset by reducing the payoffs that delivering garbage or sludge gives you in the game. So I'd say that's almost a wash. You're probably not actually shortening the game significantly by playing with all the errata. So take it as you will. It will remove some luck factor from the game if you add more errata. If you add the errata to the game, and it may shorten it a little bit, but that's about all. It also changes the flavor, balances a little bit away from hauling garbage all game. But you can't do that anyway. You end up not having that right. Just because there's this sort of pacing between, I sold garbage, I dumped garbage this turn, somebody else is going to pick it up because it's too valuable not to. And it's the only sure route that you can make every turn. Everything else, so here's the thing. As a trading game, this game's kind of insipid. I mean, it's got, outside of one thing, the one thing is the way that the prices are handled. There's nothing really exciting here. You drop off, you pick up goods, you deliver them, you get paid for them, and there's a limited number of goods, so pretty much one person is able to haul one thing at a time. There really isn't a lot You've got a random events deck. You've got some little, crew members that are like technology or something that you can discard and gain whenever you like. You've got a bunch of stuff, none of which is terribly exciting. I'm not sure if I've seen a game that put them together in sort of so light and weak a fashion. I compare it to, say, Star Trader, which does all this stuff, except not a limited commodity base. Or Merchant of Venus, which does all this stuff and does so much more in both cases in different directions. And there's very little to the core game, except for this one thing, how you set the prices. And that's actually why I picked it up. I was interested in what this design felt like and whether it was something really brilliant. In some cases, Fantasy Flight actually has, done some pretty good jobs with things that impressed me. In particular, I was impressed with Warrior Knights. And I've got a review of that a lot of people watch for some reason. I don't know, maybe nobody else puts out a review on Warrior Knights. I think their version of it actually improved the old Games Workshop version. And that was always a game that interested me a lot. So I'm always kind of curious about when they're doing something innovative to see, what did they do here? And if you strip everything else away, the whole game rises or falls on how this works. So how does it work? Well, it doesn't. Why doesn't it? So it doesn't work because it doesn't represent supply and demand at all. At one point I was trying to do some hand waving to explain how it might be taken, in the sense that, look, if a lot of people have the material, the supply is going to be low. That's not true. The supply is limited by the counter mix, right? As long as that's the case, as long as the counter mix number of barrels is the amount that could be available for supply, the prices should actually be mainly driven by that counter mix, rather than by this kind of mechanism where everybody rolls dice and gets to kind of do some price fixing based on it. I'd be willing to see that price fixing as some sort of modifier to the natural prices. But it's very, very hard to believe that the guys running the spaceships, between them, control the prices delivered. Maybe if I read that little intro stuff, it would explain some of that. Most of that seems to be about the let's look at the formation of the sky guild. Maybe that'll so they don't really go into it, but sufficiently. But if the Sky Guild completely controlled the prices by just setting them, this die roll thing doesn't really make sense. Just negotiate the prices directly, right? The players get to decide what prices to put on things and settle them by vote or whatever in that case. This little mechanism with the dice doesn't really make a hell of a lot of sense in that case. And also, if you're an outlaw, screw it, man. You try to sell things outside of that, right? You'd be doing black marketing on everything. Black market isn't limited to one material. Black market would mean that if the guild sets the price too high, if nobody's buying it, you'd probably be able to get a cheaper price when you want to buy it. If nobody's selling it, you'd probably be able to boost the price up if you hold all that material. You'd be able to put a stranglehold on the economy as one person cornering the market, just as you would in a purely capitalistic, that's not pure capitalism once you monopolize like that. But just as you would in sort of a laissez-faire type situation where nobody's trying to prevent this kind of control of a market. So it's very, very hard to justify any kind of economic system that would work this way, that allows people to go illegal in certain things like piracy and hauling grog, which is just illegal apparently, without being willing to also deal with a black market in the other goods. Okay, maybe those other goods are also regular. I have no idea. But you know what? If there are no minerals and there are people who need minerals, or if there's no food and there's people, those prices are going to fluctuate regardless. There is going to be a black market on them if there is no way of getting the materials. That's just the human nature. So unless these things are like bugs or something, and they don't look like it, they look like they're semi-human, unless they don't have a profit motive, and you could imagine stuff like that, this economic system just doesn't make sense. So the best you can do is kind of hand wave with it. What it ends up being is this weird, not fully negotiated, but, oh hey, I can roll some dice, and those are the commodities that I've got some control over. And really, between them, all the players and their dice are the only things that affect the prices. Not the amount sold, not the amount available on the market, nothing like that. And it just does not hang together and provide anything believable at all. I was hoping, I really was, that it would. Now, as a gameplay mechanism, the problem with it is that these dice and the garbage scow emphasis of the game, which is there even, I'm sure, with the errata, just because it's the only sure thing out there, end up making it so that you probably monopolize a good, and then it turns around and nobody's willing to support you on the price for it, so you got to kind of hope. So the only time you'll ever buy a good is when it's at the lowest possible price, because otherwise you're almost assured to lose money on it. But there is a fair chance, especially if you are late in the player turn after you buy it, in terms of the price fixing in the guild, to be able to jump at a space or two if your dice are lucky. Now this allows you, the influence thing allows you to choose your own dice. And this is of course why it can't be a pure wheeling and dealing and negotiation game. So the guild doesn't control the entirety of the price, but no other factors of any sense seem to, right? This allows you to pick which dice you want to have influence in. And you're allowed one or two of them as you advance further. So, first off, obviously, it's not just the guild members getting together and setting the price, which, as I said, wouldn't work. What it seems to include is other businesses and everything. And those other businesses largely set their price at the random influence of the guild members. Which is to say, someone comes to you and says, hey, I want you to fix the price of spice in your favor, but I don't really care which way it goes, or something like that. I cannot imagine what it's supposed to represent, and that's just a pure problem with the design. Compare this to the very simple design of something like Power Grid, where supply and demand works very, very nicely, and very elegantly. In this, you have kind of this annoying system that doesn't really hold together terribly well at all. You can certainly go to more complex systems that work well. I was really hoping that this would provide some sort of insight into how markets actually work in a way that, say, Crusoe's Planet does, which, that's an astounding game on looking at different economic systems. Now, obviously, this was never meant to be that, but I was hoping this would give one picture of a plausible economic system, and instead it gives a game mechanism that doesn't link to anything I can possibly agree is imaginable. It's just it's a completely, you've got this insipid base game with a economic system that makes no sense whatsoever. To me, that's a pretty big disappointment. I don't know. As a playable game, though, it's okay. If you just want to play this game as a competition, it's kind of neat. There's a decent amount of luck involved. There's less luck involved when you add the errata to the game, but I think that would make the game less enjoyable because there's really nothing else to the game but that decent amount of luck involved. So I really don't know, what was going on here. The core thought behind this game just seems to be a failure. And yes, there's something salvageable from it, but there are better games out there, to waste your time with if that's all you want to do. If you just want to roll dice and have things happen to you, there are much more interesting games than this.